Shalom. Last thought about giving praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Ruach HaKadosh. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Salutations to the Ophelet that's pushing his truth across four corners of the earth and offer truth and sincerity. On this, I'm a one about back again, us sitting. That's what we're going to about this post I saw. It was on X. It's posted by his Rap House TV. So I'm gonna read it. It says, stay-at-home boyfriends are now reportedly on the rise in the U.S. as women now hold more payroll jobs than men in 2026. So when I saw this, a scripture came to mind, which I'm gonna get it, but a scripture came to mind. And I saw this, man. So I'm gonna read some of this. I'm gonna get the scripture to back this up. I'm not gonna make this too long. So go down to like the about this. Says the report explains that women now hold more payroll jobs than men in the United States, making only the third time this has happened. Unlike previous instance during the Great Recession and the COVID-19 pandemic, economists believe that this shift is not temporary but part of a long-term change in the labor market. Over the past 2 years, women have gained hundreds of thousands of jobs, while male employment has declined, largely because industries with the strongest hiring, such as healthcare, social assistance, and caregiving, are dominated by women. Meanwhile, sectors that traditionally employ more men, including manufacturing, finance, media, and parts of technology, have experienced slower growth or job losses. Excuse me. The article also examines the rise of the so-called stay-at-home boyfriend as a growing economic and cultural trend. It was like economic cultural trend. If I'm saying, forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong, saying that wrong. Researchers say researchers say fewer young men are participating in the workforce than previous generations, with factors including changing career opportunities, educational gaps, family financial support, and shifting social norms. As more women become primary earners, some couples are choosing arrangements where the man stays home or is unemployed while his partner works. Economists emphasize that this does not mean most men are stay-at-home partners, but rather that changing unemployment patterns are making such households more common and socially accepted in the past. Yeah, man, I only thought of one scripture that came to mind, so I'm gonna get the scripture to back this up, man. Hey, man, this system, man. These so-called white people, Edomite devils, they gotta get out the way, man. They doing this, man. They got everything upside down, man. But let me get the scripture to back this up. This is on Jeremiah 31:22. How long wilt thou go about, O thou backsliding daughter? For the Lord Yahweh shall have created a new thing in the earth. a woman shall surpass a man. So this is the scripture that came to mind when I saw this, and I'm like, man, like that is crazy. Like to see this happening, and it's scriptural, right? It's the Lord, says this is gonna happen. Women are, out, more doing the in the labor field, more working more than men, and men are staying home now. Like, and let's say it's not all men. Like I say, it's not, but for like the increasing amount of women that's more out in the field, out outside, or doing things out more than being at the house, so it's this system, man. It's these damn Edomites, man. They just oppressing the so-called Negro Latino Israelite men. They try not, they not hiring a lot of so-called Negro Latino Israelite men into those workforce fields out there, to do those labor jobs, just out out in the field, whatever, right? Because for the most part, men really supposed to be out, out there, in the field working, doing those labor jobs, working whatever out in the field, out and about, but you got women. Women are, women supposed to be, like I said, mostly at the house, take care of the household, but it's not like that, man. Like, it's just cause, like I say, these these wicked Edomite doubles, man, they doing this, man. The role reverse, right? Roles have reversed, and like I say, it was because of this wicked Edomite double. But like I say, hey, the word of the Lord, has it warned us about showing like this was gonna happen, this was gonna come about. But it's Yahweh Bashan Shai, he's in full control, and that's why this is happening. To the so-called Negro Latino Israelites, the men, it just it just in this low estate, just in this low just like I said, this low estate, man, that we're in, just how this it's just how, man, we went from just being masculine. The masculinity of the Israelite man is it's on decline, right? You seeing like I said, it's not all, but for the most part, the whole nation of Israelite men, it's like decline of masculinity, and a man, supposed to be a man, and just but it's this system in this world, is making the so-called Negro Latino Israelite man soft, and having an effeminate vibration of spirit, and you got these so-called Negro Latino Israelite men wearing these bonnets and stuff that women wear, just being too comfortable, man. And I say, man, this but hey, man, it's prophecy, man. Like, it's, man, I say, man, Most High Yahweh, it's his power to be taken serious, man. Power to be feared, but it's gonna change, it's not gonna continue to be like this for the so-called Negro Latino Israelites, the men, being this, low vibration, lower state that we in this system, man. It's gonna change, man. We're gonna get that, gonna get built up, get back, into that power and that masculinity, strength of, and it's but like I said, it's gonna be loyal about Shai. He's gonna do that. He's gonna bring the so-called Negro, Latino Israelites, men, back into their power and masculinity, strength, and like I say, gonna be, things gonna get back in order. Right now things are just out of order right now. But I'll go to another scripture. It's Isaiah. As for my people, Isaiah 3:12. As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, that which lead thee cause thee to err, and destroy the way of thy path. So children are their oppressors. And as for my people, children are their oppressors. Who they're talking about right there? They're talking about the so-called white people, Esau and my devils that's in power. That's the oppressor, right? That's the one that oppressing you, so-called Negro, Latino, Israelite men. With these, they come up with these laws and so forth to, keep you from, rising up, and so forth. Keep you just, not doing it as a man like you're supposed to, doing like you want to, do it for, as a man, right? Keeping you like, you can't, do certain things or say certain things, or, as a man, that's masculine, right? And that's what the so-called white people, these East Side doubles, they what they doing, man. But like I said, it's gonna change. It's not gonna be like this forever. Cause these so-called white people, East Side doubles, these red devils, they time of rulership is at an end, man. It's not too much longer to this that we got to deal with this. This upside down, setup. Everything's just out of order. And I say women, and are acting like men, and men, being acting like women, feminine. But like I say, women rule over them. We got the nigga woman. It's just the head honcho. She with the so-called white man, East Side white devils. They ain't hand in hand of keeping the so-called Negro, Latino, Israelite man in check, to not get too riled up or masculine. You can't say things, or you can't say this or do that or whatever. But that's gonna change. Because like I said, the Lord Yahweh is gonna, he's gonna rouse up, raise up the so-called Negro, Latino, Israelite man, that masculine, strength and power, bring that respect back, amongst the so-called Negro, Latino, Israelite men, Like I said, Lord Yahweh he's gonna change it, he's gonna reverse it, man, And like I say, these different Israelite leaders, men that leading Israel the wrong way, These different Israelite camp groups or heads of the camps are teaching false doctrine and teaching it's okay for you to do this, to do that, and that's not according to the scriptures, or what Lord Yahweh says, the apostles and the elders and Brother Great Millstone to teach the word of Lord Yahweh Shai, because Lord Yahweh Shai is dealing with the men of Great Millstone, right? Teaching the correct way, the correct doctrine of Lord Yahweh Shai, His word, His truth, to give you so-called Negro, Latino, Israelites men first, to get the understanding, of His word and truth, and to apply it and so forth. Lead you in the right direction and understand the Lord Yahweh Shai word. But these different Israelite camps are leading you in the way, it's gonna destroy you, so-called Negro, Latino Israelites, men and women as well. that listen to the different Israelite groups or whatever, right? It's gonna lead. I say a lot. Let's say like 2/3 Israelites, that subscribe to these false leaders of Israelites. False leaders of Israel. False. These false prophets or whatever. They're gonna lead you right to be destroyed, man. Only ones that really gonna show you the right way to go and to get the real understanding of the word of Lord Yahweh Shai is the apostles and the elders and brother Graham Millstone. That like I said, that the Lord Yahweh Shai is dealing with, in the spirit to give you understanding of His word, the breakdowns and so forth, and of the prophecies and so forth, or the word, so but I didn't want to make this too long, so Lord willing, hope this was edifying. So again, I'd like to give all praise and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Ruach HaKodesh, to the apostle elders, to the Sasakin brothers, to the few Akwaf sisters that do listen, keep the faith, and Yahushua keep fighting this at Shalom.